Okay, so this is something of an experiment where yesterday or not yesterday, what is time? This over the weekend, Sunday, I think, I recorded a bunch of videos of me playing Slay the Spire with the specific intention of not becoming a famous Slay the Spire YouTuber, but of just trying to use it as a way of reflexively, not reflexively, of being more conscious about my play and learning to play the game a little bit better by doing a sort of talk aloud protocol where I explain what I'm doing and use that as a way of becoming more conscious. Um, Separately from that, I want more ways of writing like relatively short newsletters, and um, also I want to improve my writing. And so it seemed like doing a newsletter about this would be a good call. And it seemed like it would be a funny idea to try and record myself doing it. So that's what I'm doing. You will see my hilariously bad writing process. Generally, I just start writing and sort of see what piece emerges. It'll be a bit different here because I think it's a much shorter thing where I know what I intend to write about, but it's worth a go, I think. I don't know why I start emails with hi. These emails with hi everyone. It's just what I started doing right at the back of the beginning, and it sort of stuck. Um, I find I have stage fright as soon as I come to write while being observed. There's a fun thing that happens when you sort of have someone watching over your shoulder, watching you type, and you just immediately lose all confidence in typing. And this feels a little bit about a bit like that. Well, let's try give it a go. Um, so I guess one thing to do here is to link it into last week's. Is it? I don't know. I can delete that later if I decide it's not. Very weak opening. One of the problems with this is that it makes one significantly more self-conscious about what one's doing. And I didn't really find that was a problem with Slay the Spire, but because I'm interested in writing and I'm much more invested personally in writing, like suddenly the feeling that I'm being watched during my writing process feels vastly more vulnerable than it did with Slay the Spire. So this is an interesting experiment. I may decide not to upload this video if it's just slightly too cringe, but we'll give it a go. definitely my standard approach to writing is to just sort of let things flow a bit naturally. And I frequently end up sitting down and writing and going, and not really knowing where I'm going with it. And that's happening a little bit here. And the slightly more conscious attitude to it is making it somewhat difficult to enter that flow state, which I think that was good for Slay the Spire, because I think flow state is not actually the optimal state for playing Slay the Spire. It's just the optimal state for enjoying playing Slay the Spire. Whilst with writing, there is a much larger degree of that for me. And I think in some sense that there probably shouldn't be. Like, I think one of the things that I would like to get better at is deliberately writing, which is why this is a good experiment. But it's very much doing that thing where, like, if you ask someone to explain how to dance, they suddenly get self-conscious and aren't as good at it because they don't know where to place their feet. There's some Aesop's fable about a centipede, I think. It might not be an Aesop, it might be a joke. I naturally can only do this in one take, so I apologize for any generic sounds that come out through me doing that. In particular, I don't know how much you can hear the typing and or me drinking my coffee. I may do some sound editing afterwards, but realistically, I probably won't. One thing to consider here is what I'm actually trying to get people what I actually want people to get out of this. Like, there's a thing of the sort of the book that should have been a blog post, the blog post that should have been a tweet, and I wonder to what degree the tweet version of this is just the thing I want to get out of this. Like, maybe I should start here. Bit of a joke there, but I think not entirely false. One of the things I get very self-conscious about with this is that I don't actually like listening to my voice very much. I think that's a very normal experience. Among other reasons, because you notice how many times you say in a sentence when you do this. But also it's got the thing where, because you normally hear your voice through bone conduction, you don't really sound like you think you do. And you also, notice all sorts of mannerisms that you didn't realize you had. Like, apparently I do uptalk. That's the thing I do. Yes, that was deliberate. All right, let's link in the Slay the Spire videos here. No, you can see my YouTube watching habits on this. This is one of the other reasons why I'm self-conscious about this, because like I'm not really going to edit anything out of this, so you unless I'm very careful, you can see other things that are happening on my computer. I did close everything else first though, so that's relatively bounded. Let's provide context first. Standard advice for writing is that you should write and then edit, and this is correct, and it's usually what I do, but I think to some degree having the sort of the audio talk aloud protocol is acting as my zeroth draft. Zeroth draft is a concept I have from a book, which I really like. The book is, I think, Write Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day, which I probably should have read before I quit my PhD rather than after, but I still liked it. And what she suggests is having essentially like a lot of raw material that you can essentially mine for data later. And most of it never enters into even your first draft, let alone your final draft, but it acts as a sort of repository of like things you thought of while writing and gets you unblocked from writing it. And having this sort of talk aloud is in some sense zeroth draft, like certainly will be interesting data for me to watch back later. I have no idea what was happening with that typo. All right, I'll insert the preamble here. Where's that? No, I don't have any templates. The last one was... Why is that showing up as conditional acceptance on the title page? That's interesting. Right, that's fine. Some little sneak preview of the paid newsletter there. If you're really dedicated, you could even get access to the private version if you're paying attention. Anyone who cares that much is welcome to it. It's not a big deal. The stuff that goes on in the private newsletter is not super confidential, and I sort of assume that most people will occasionally forward it. I should include some sort of preamble here about why this is going to be a shorter post than usual. various verbal tics that this makes me much more conscious of while doing, like the tendency to start a sentence with a thing that, when those are really dead words that I could just delete. Having the headings is a good way to break up the piece, but I'm never entirely sure what my heading convention is, and like whether they're jokes or whether they're serious section markers or delete that, delete that. Going with that title, I should explain a little bit about what Slay the Spire is and what I'm doing with it. Are they monsters, or are they just different types of people? I mean, some of them are clearly verbal, so I think they're people. Monsters are people too. I am overly fond of sarcastic footnotes, and I make no apologies for this. Here, I'd like to sort of give a paragraph summary of what it was I was actually doing to why I thought the recording myself approach might help. I could maybe link to some of Jorbs's over-explained runs. I could use this as an opportunity to explain the peak thing, but that sort of makes more sense in the next section. Probably like a basic paragraph of why I thought that this would help would be the right thing to do then. This sort of suggests a natural point at which to end the Slay the Spire related content, so I think I will do that and start a new section. I should poke fun at myself. I like poking fun at myself. This naturally links to a previous blog post. I should do that. I miss this cat. He's still fine, by the way. I miss him because he lives in Switzerland and I don't. Irrelevant. Irrelevant. I don't know if I entirely believe this because part of the problem is that what we're seeing right now, right? Which is that Slay the Spire is something where your more considered reflective self is a better version of yourself um, than your intuitive play self, because it's a game that really rewards thinking very hard and sort of very deliberately about what you're doing. But with writing, that isn't entirely the case, right? It's and I imagine that like doing something like this with the juggling would be even worse. I do sort of want to try doing it with juggling now, though. I think the thing there would be less talk aloud protocol and more um, using it to sort of see what you actually look like with juggling, which is sort of an Alexander Technique thing. Like Alexander Technique is big on the use of mirrors as a way of correcting how your self-perception. In mentioning Alexander Technique, I have immediately thought about my posture, which is one of the ways in which Alexander Technique probably improves your posture. Altogether in Michael Ashcroft's voice, Alexander Technique has nothing to do with posture. I'm just going to take the entire long spiel and turn it into one sentence. Uh, I'd like to include a section here about recording myself writing. I will just call it that. I may edit this later. Um, now I need to include a postscript about the coaching. I will again steal that from previous newsletter issue. I will, in fact, haven't closed the coaching auction just yet. Though I will do that after this. So I'll edit all of this later. There's a bunch of editing I'm going to do after this, and I won't do that live on screen. But this was at least an interesting experiment. I don't think that it resulted in worse writing, at least, so I think like that's neutral. It kept me focused on writing a bit better than it otherwise would have. I think if I were feeling more motivated, what I would do now is actually do a read through out loud of what I've written and see if that improves matters. Because it's often a good way to improve your writing voice. You know, I'm feeling just enough motivated that I'll do that for a few paragraphs, actually. So let's see. This weekend I did an experiment with this. I've already improved my writing because I haven't. I reordered this and so that resulted in that being entirely without a referent for this. Let's try this again. This weekend I did an experiment and recorded myself playing Slay the Spire. You can see the videos here, and there may be more in future. And there may be more in future. Same as redundant. The goal isn't really to become a famous Slay the Spire YouTuber, though people do seem to enjoy them, and I may record more. Sentence is too long. I'm just trying to improve my Slay the Spire play. Slay the Spire is a game I play a lot of. This whole sentence is garbage. I guess I'm editing this on screen. I think one of the reasons I find editing frustrating is that it's one of those things where writing. One of those things is another of my verbal tics. Writing is something you can get almost unboundedly good at. Like, there is no point at which you are able to say, yes, I'm the best writer I can possibly be. And so you have to decide like what the point of good enough is. And sort of barely editing your work is a pretty defensible point for that, because you're just like, well, I don't care, I'm just not editing it. But like, once you start editing, the question of when you stop editing is almost impossible to answer, other than like when it becomes a choice between like editing and quitting and going and herding yaks or goats in the Alps somewhere. The goal isn't really to become a famous Slay the Spire YouTuber. People do seem to enjoy them, and I may record more. But by recording it, I'm forced to be a bit more conscious of what I'm doing in ways that let me notice my weaknesses and improve on them. This would be a good place to link to the bugs versus errors live journal post that Cash Legend linked me to recently. This one? Yes. I should mention further up here that I've actually, like I wasn't silently recording this, I was explaining what I was doing. As part of my attempts to improve, this weekend I did an experiment and recorded myself playing through a complete run, explaining what I was doing as I played, and thinking through my reasoning out loud. You can see the videos here. The goal isn't to become a famous Slay the Spire YouTuber, though people do seem to enjoy them and I may record more. But by recording it, I'm forced to be a bit more conscious of what I'm doing in ways that let me notice my weaknesses and improve on them. It lets me notice bugs in my play as a prelude to fixing them. Additionally, recording just improved my play fairly directly. I tend to play Slay the Spire very intuitively, where I don't think through my moves as much as I could. Explaining them out loud slows me down and makes me articulate the reasoning. Often it turns out the reasoning is wrong, and there is something better I could do. Two particularly interesting bugs that became obvious in the course of those runs were I'm very bad at state management. I tend to forget to have certain things and then run into them the hard way. E.g., I kept forgetting that I had Velvet Choker, which limits the number of cards I can play. I will delete the Combust Centennial puzzle. Example just seems unnecessary, overly complicated. Often there's a way out that I would miss unless I think harder than I usually do. There were probably at least 5 times when I said something along the lines of, I'm definitely dead here. The former suggests I should try playing Slay the Spire with a notepad or something, a list of things to definitely not forget in this run, and that I add entries to the first time I swear myself over them. Hopefully with time I will no longer need it. The latter suggests that doing more of these videos will help build my intuition for what's possible, though I doubt I ever get to the point where I don't need to think at all. What did I use as the rubber duck link last time? makes sense. I like rubber duck debugging as a safety net, as a phrase. Because I'm me, I can't do something as simple as trying to get good at a computer game without immediately thinking about generalizations of it. Think about generalizations. In this case, the generalization is this. If you have something you want to get better at, try recording yourself doing it. If you're brave, you can put the recording up on YouTube. If you're really brave, you can even watch it yourself. I recently read Peak, which is a book about expertise. This feels waffly. I'm going to delete all this. Okay, I'm going to declare this good enough for now. As I say, this it's a very direct title, but I think it will do the job. I may change it before I put this out, but we'll see. Okay. Yeah, so this is now time to close this down. If you've made it to the end of this very awkward video, congratulations, thank you, and I'm sorry. There's that uptalk again. I may record more, I may not. It sort of depends on how much I hate watching this back. I may also not share them if I do record more. But I'm glad I did this experiment. Bye for now.